Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Beckham will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, I got my co-host, Jack McCurry, running with me today. But we also do have a special guest. He is Tony Serino of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Tony, man, it's been about a year. We've just kind of talked about it off air here. But it's been about a year since we've had you on. And hopefully this Thursday we have a better game than we did last year.
Yeah, hopefully we decide a winner this time around. I'm excited to talk to you guys, though. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, you know, we got to get you in here. Got to talk Pittsburgh Steelers because it's obviously a huge week. You know, the Steelers have done a great job even without having Ben Roethlisberger. They've won 4 out of the last 5 and 5 out of the last 6. So, you know, they're just keep on rolling. And you know, it's a thing around here where we wish that I guess we were Pittsburgh because despite all the issues that has gone on with the Le'Veon Bell stuff, the Antonio Brown stuff, Roethlisberger being out, for some reason the franchise in Pittsburgh finds a way to get through everything, where if that would have happened here in Cleveland, it just would have derailed the entire season and it would just be a long year.
Well, it really has been, and you look at the two franchises and where they are right now, it really has been a tale of two expectations, right? In Pittsburgh, especially after the Ben Roethlisberger injury, there weren't a whole lot of expectations for this team, right? You know, the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade was criticized because it was thought that this Steeler team was going to pretty much implode, and, you know, what are they going to do with Mason Rudolph, and this could be a 3-13 team, this could be a top 5 pick. Whereas in Cleveland, right, it's been nothing but expectation there all offseason, and I think that has in some ways really hurt the Browns this year. So, yeah, you know, I talk about this team as the Steelers as this kind of being a free money year for them, right? I mean, you know, there's no expectation right now. You talked about the Antonio Brown situation, the Le'Veon Bell thing, right? And this was, if Ben had stayed healthy, all that stuff would have reared its head at some point, right? The kind of, hey, how come this offense isn't as good without AB, right? I thought he was supposed to be the problem, and Le'Veon Bell and all of that. But that's gone away now because of the fact that Ben's gotten hurt. And what's been able to happen is you started to see some young talent emerge defensively for the Steelers, and this has really gone back to the traditional Steelers mold, which is a great defense and an offense that, I mean, let's be honest, with Mason Rudolph behind the helm is barely getting it done. But you know, like you said, they're on a winning streak right now. They're back above 500. They're in the playoff race, and that's something, you know, when this team was 0-3 about a month and a half ago, I would not have said this team was going to be a 5-4 football team, looking at what is, you know, probably their easiest stretch of the schedule coming up.
Yeah, you brought it up. I mean, the defense has been the key to their success down this recent stretch. Talk about the defense, and obviously there's a lot of young talent. There's some veterans there that have been there throughout the years. Just talk about why the defense has been firing on all cylinders and why they're a top 10 scoring defense.
Well, we have to start with Minkah Fitzpatrick because that trade really did change everything about this Steeler team and that Steeler defense. And not to say that it was a bad defense before Minkah got there, but he was really the missing piece. And I think that's what a lot of people missed about the trade outside of Pittsburgh, right? Because you know, Chris and I, who co-host Locked On Steelers, we were both pretty excited about the trade because Minkah represented something that the Steelers really hadn't had, you know, going all the way back. You'd have to go back to Polamalu to have a real playmaker in the secondary. And this team has been trying to get back to that level of play, right? The 2008, 2009, 2010 years of Troy Polamalu at his best, that defense at its best. It's been almost 10 years now since they've had a real dominating defense, and they've got some good players, right? That Cam Hayward on the defensive line, one of the best defensive players on a 3-4 as far as a 3-4 defensive end. T.J. Watt was really emerging as a young, good edge rusher. but they just didn't have any playmakers in that secondary. So Minkah coming in and what he's been able to do, the couple big plays he's made these last couple weeks obviously have been the splash plays that make all the headlines there on SportsCenter. But really throughout the year, he's changed this defense from being one last year that really had a tough time getting turnovers to this year. They are second in the league only to the New England Patriots at getting turnover, and really been a real transformation from top to bottom. You've seen very good defensive line play, like I said, from Cam Hayward. Stephon Tuitt, when he was healthy, was playing really well. They've done good without him. He's out for the year. Devin Busch in the middle, adding that speed, that versatility in the middle of the field. Also Mark Barron, who, Mark Barron not had a great year, playing better as of late. But he's another guy who adds some versatility. He's a safety turned inside linebacker, adds more speed on that defense. Steven Nelson was a cornerback that was brought in the offseason from the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were one of the worst defensive teams in the year or in the league last year. So, when he was brought in as this kind of marquee signing in the offseason, a lot of Steelers fans looked at Steven Nelson and said, "Oh, this is going to be another guy in a long line of busts for the Steelers at the cornerback spot." But he's been anything other than that. I mean, he's been spectacular, arguably having a better year than Joe Hayden, and Hayden's having a pretty good year himself. So this has just been a real transformation for this team. They've always been able to get pressure on the quarterback. They've been in the top 5 in sacks for the last couple of years, but now they're turning that into turnovers, turning that into splash plays. It's not all on Minkah, but I think Minkah has a huge part to play in that.
Yeah, just looking at the history of Pittsburgh, at least from what I remember, they've always had that dominant pass rush, and they have 33 sacks as a team this year with guys like Watt and Dupree. That defensive line and those linebackers, I'm impressed every time I watch this team, and I think we're a little bit surprised by what Watt has been able to do, living up to the family name and what JJ has been able to do. But TJ, I think, has probably turned himself into a better overall player just in the fact that he's been able to stay healthy. And I think a lot of people are quite surprised with what he's been able to do.
For sure, and the expectation for him coming out of college was, he was taken at the end of the first round, so he wasn't thought of as this premier pass rusher, but that's really what he's turned into. And then you talk about Bud Dupree. I mean, I forgot. I don't know how I didn't talk about Bud Dupree during my whole thing there about the defense, because he has been. We talk about a most improved player year over year. I mean, this is year 5 for Bud Dupree. He's basically in a contract year. He will likely have to go elsewhere next year because he is going to get mega paid in the offseason. But he's been spectacular alongside, and that's really what the Steelers have been missing, is that kind of 1-2 punch at the outside linebacker position. You remember James Harrison and Lamar Woodley, and that 1-2 punch that the Steelers had back in that 2008 defense I talk about. Not to say that these two guys are on the level of James Harrison and Lamar Woodley just yet, but they're getting there, and Bud's been a big part of it. TJ, he's got the skill set that you want, which is that he's got a move and he's got a backup move. He's very good at the point of attack. He's got a good burst off the line of scrimmage. He has the bend to turn the corner, and he's just he's got that. Whatever it is, right? The kind of moxie, the kind of will to get there. I mean, this is a guy who was he was gassed out at the end of that Rams game, but you wouldn't have known it watching him play because he's in there making plays left and right, and he's look, I wouldn't call him Defensive Player of the Year for the Steelers because Minkah exists, right? Because Minkah's there. But if Minkah weren't on this team, maybe it would be T.J. Watt.
You talked about how, the Fitzpatrick acquisition was criticized at the time it happened. Another move that I think did take some criticism, although it looks like it's paying off, is when the Steelers moved up 10 spots in the draft to take Devin Busch. Talk about the impact he's made already as a rookie, because he's putting up some incredible numbers surrounded by a ton of talent as well.
Yeah, and he's he was that kind of interior playmaker that the Steelers needed. He's quieted off a bit recently, but earlier in the year he was making plays. He had a big interception against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in that game. Look, this was a trade that the Steelers had to make because they missed out on this position entirely in the 2018 season, and that really led to some poor play in the middle of the field. Teams were just killing the Steelers in the middle of the field. Tight ends, wide receivers over the middle, whatever they wanted to do over the middle of the field. It was easy pickings for teams against the Steelers. So, adding Mark Barron has really tightened that up. Not that the Steeler defense has no weakness. I think that they're a little susceptible right now against the run. It'd be interesting to see if the Browns with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt try to attack that. I think that's been a weakness of Mark Barron and Devin Busch in the middle. But in the passing game, you're not seeing teams able to just kind of pick on this team over the middle or go to running backs out of the backfield or just, go to tight ends at will anymore. The teams have to be more creative offensively, and when we talk about that pass rush, they try to get more creative. But when T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree and Cam Hayward are bearing down on the quarterback, it's hard to do that, and that's really why this Steeler defense looks like a totally different team in 2019.
There are so many people here in Cleveland that are still upset with Sashi Brown when him and Joe Hayden couldn't figure out a contract, and there were a couple down years that he had, but this year he seems to really be putting it back together. It's probably the best year that he's played as a member of the Steelers. What has made Joe so successful this season? Is it just the other guys around him? They're playing full complementary defense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just complementary defense, right? It's why is Bud Dupree having such a good year? And this is not to take away anything from Joe Hayden or Bud Dupree or any of these guys, right? But when it isn't so easy to pick on a team over the middle of the field, right? When the quarterback doesn't have an easy safety valve, because now all of a sudden teams aren't going up against John Bostic over the middle, right? It's Devin Busch, it's Mark Barron. It makes it easier for a guy like Bud Dupree to get some pressure, or with Joe Hayden, right? When he's got Minkah playing alongside him, it makes him better. He doesn't have to worry about is it going to be Cam Kelly? Is Cam going to be in his spot? That kind of thing. I mean, I think it's all of that kind of permeating throughout the team. And it has led to, like you said, though, Joe Hayden. I mean, this is a guy who this week he had a big interception. I think he had 5 pass defenses against the Rams. He's having a spectacular year. Now, the question with Joe Hayden is always, is he in the twilight, right? I mean, the people were telling Steeler fans when they signed Joe Hayden a couple years back that he was already in the twilight of his career. And now we're kind of seeing, like you talked about, this little rejuvenation. The Steelers signed him to a contract extension in the offseason. We'll see how much more Joe Hayden has left in the tank, but certainly if we're just talking about the 2019 season, fantastic.
Do you think he'll get the duty of covering Odell Beckham on Thursday, or is he going to rotate between him and Jarvis Landry?
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of a rotation. Is Jarvis going to line up in the slot? I know the Browns have toyed with that a bit.
He's been lining up in the slot. He's been moving him around to the outside as well.
Okay.
It just depends on the personnel usage.
Yeah. So what'll end up happening? I mean, the Steelers don't usually, because Nelson and Hayden have been playing so well, they haven't really had a guy travel with one guy. So what'll end up happening is if Landry's in the slot, he'll get covered by Mike Hilton, and wherever Odell is in the formation, he'll get covered by either Hayden or Nelson. I don't think they'll have him travel. They just haven't done it all year. And while, look, Odell is a great wide receiver and one of the best the Steelers have faced in the past couple weeks, I don't see Keith Butler or Mike Tomlin making that change, especially on a short week, right? This Thursday game doesn't leave a lot of time for these kind of massive changes to your defensive philosophy. So I think the Steelers will stay with what they do, and they don't have cornerbacks travel like that.
And to kind of bring it all around, they really don't have to worry about it because of having Minkah Fitzpatrick behind those guys, and
right.
you could do things to where you don't have to worry about your corners as much because you have a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick sitting back there waiting.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that like we talked about, that complementary defense. You don't have to get when you have 11 very good players and all these guys are really playing at a high level right now. You don't have to do a lot of crazy things defensively to make it work. It just you put those guys out there and try not to screw it up. Essentially, as a coach.
While the defense has been so dominant this year, I think one of the things to where the Steelers have struggled is on the offensive side, and I think that's kind of obviously not having Big Ben and losing guys like Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. You kind of expected that a little bit, and with Mason Rudolph stepping in, he's looked okay, but he really hasn't kind of per se lit it up.
Right. No, hasn't lit it up is the understatement of the century. He's been, if we're just going to be real here, he's been bad, right? He's been a bad quarterback. His numbers, you wouldn't know it from his numbers, right? And this is what Steeler fans love to throw in everyone's face who likes to say Mason Rudolph's a bad quarterback. They go, well, look at him. He's got to look at his passer rating, right? Look at his completion percentage, all that. If you watch Mason Rudolph play, Mason Rudolph doesn't, at most of the time, does not resemble a starting NFL quarterback. But that's okay because he's in year 2. They weren't expecting him to come in this early, and he has progressed from where he started. But this is a Steeler offense that is really, really struggling. And I think it's for a couple reasons, right? Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger going down has a huge part to play. And the biggest reason why. Yes, Antonio Brown not being there makes things worse. Although, could you imagine Antonio Brown, with Mason Rudolph as his quarterback and the kind of, we talk about drama and all of that nonsense that would happen? I don't want to imagine that world. So maybe it's better. Maybe it's better that AB is not on this team while Mason Rudolph is the quarterback. The other thing that happened this offseason is they lost their offensive line coach, Mike Munchak, who was also the run game coordinator. So the Steelers' running game has kind of taken a step down. The offensive line as a run blocking unit hasn't been as good. And I think those are things that are definitely correlated. So, Mason Rudolph, not good so far. And you guys will see this on Thursday night. There are times where Mason goes back there, that first read isn't there. He gets a little panicky. Now, to this point, he's been very good about just kind of checking it down. The Steelers have done a good job of getting the ball to Jalen Samuels and their running backs out of the backfield this week against the Rams. It was more of the tight ends, so you saw Nick Vanette and Vance McDonald get involved. But Mason, when the Steelers have drives, when the Steelers have actually that's the whole sentence. When the Steelers have drives, that's when fans go, oh look, Mason looks good, right? But those are so few and far between. The majority of the time, the Steelers are, they're going 3, 4, 5 plays and out, and they're putting it on their defense to make big plays and get them short fields, or what they've relied on these last couple games. Look, the Steelers won by 5 against the Rams. The 7 points came from a Minkah fumble touchdown, right? They won by 2 against the Indianapolis Colts. 7 of that came on a Minkah pick 6. So this offense is not exactly lighting it up out there, and it starts with Mason not playing well, but he's getting better, and the hope for Steeler fans is that he continues to improve as the Steelers make what is this incredible, improbable playoff run.
And, to help Rudolph, it looks like James Conner's coming back this week. He's missed the last couple of weeks with a shoulder injury. Prior to the injury, he had his best game of the year against Miami with 145 rushing yards. Talk about how much Conner has meant to Rudolph in terms of helping the offense be able to move the chains down the field.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly when Mason first came in, right? I mean, it was about as bad as you would ever see in Pittsburgh, because Mason Rudolph, that first game against the 49ers, I think he completed 2 passes more than 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage. The last quarterback to do that in an NFL game was Tim Tebow. So Mason started about as low as you could as an NFL quarterback, and so then the very next week, that was against the Cincinnati Bengals. They kind of went with that wildcat look, right? They just went to Conner and Samuels and went completely run heavy, and that's really been a big key to their success. When this team has had some real offensive success, it has gone through Jalen Samuels, James Conner, that running game, and then you have Rudolph there. You pick up a third down here, pick up a third down there, make a big play downfield to Deontay Johnson. This has been a team that certainly has relied on the running game. The problem for James Conner is that he hasn't been able to stay healthy this year. And so even Conner's best games, I think his best game this year was probably that Chargers game, right? But that was the game where he went down late in that game. He left that game injured. And he's done that probably too many times this year for Steeler fans. So that's a worry because, look, he's coming off of this injury now on a short week. I know they rested him on against the Rams so that he would be healthy for this game. But, the worry has to be that he goes down with some other injury, because that's just been his story so far. So the Steelers need to get a running game going. It's been their key to success. I don't know if they want to rely on James Conner being that sole guy, or if they want to continue this rotation with he and Samuels, and then if Trey Edmonds is back, or Tony Brooks-James, whoever the third guy is going to be.
I was going to make a Tim Tebow playoff joke, but I would have received a Tommy Maddox joke in return. So I'm not going to do that. But on the offensive side,
I'm actually offended that you're comparing Tommy Maddox to Tim Tebow, because I love T-Gun. Don't diss my boy T-Gun on this podcast.
Well, it's a tough playoff losses for both of us.
Yeah. I got it.
But you guys do have some good playmakers on offense. You got Juju. James Washington seems to be settling in the second season. You guys traded for Nick Vanette. I would say Vance McDonald, from what I've seen, has had kind of a letdown year. Talk about those guys. It seems Mason does have guys who throw the football too. It's just a matter of making plays and stopping those guys.
Yeah, and it's Chris and I talked about this on a recent episode where we kind of talked about what our expectations are for the rest of the year, right? Because I talk about this as being a free money year for the Steelers, right? I'm really high on this Steeler team as it enters the 2020 season, right? You take what is this defense today, and then you combine it with a Ben Roethlisberger-led offense, and what could that team be in this AFC, which is obviously not good. And so the worry I have is that this is a year where this team was supposed to replace Antonio Brown and find out what it had in Juju as a number one, and could James Washington step up as that number two guy, and Deontay Johnson as another receiver in this kind of long line of the Steelers just developing any receiver that comes into the program. And so Mason Rudolph being the quarterback has really, I'm not saying it's stunted that growth, but it's just made it hard to evaluate, right? You talked about James Washington stepping up in these last couple of weeks. Yes, that is true, and James Washington is finally looking like the James Washington that we've seen in preseason and in training camp for the past couple of years. But you can't draw any conclusions off a 2-game sample size. And the problem is we're 9 games into the year now, and we're just finally seeing James Washington get involved really in any significant way. Deontay Johnson has been, here and there throughout the year. Juju's been really, really quiet, but I think teams have really tried to take him out of games and make everybody else beat them. It's just a worry about this team. You talk about Vance McDonald having a down year, right? I think Vance is still the same Vance. He's got a different quarterback throwing him the ball right now, and that's been the biggest issue. That's my biggest issue with trying to evaluate this offense. Is you watch the tape, you see guys get open. Mason either doesn't look their way, he's too hesitant to throw it into traffic. He's so risk averse at this point. He's just end up checking it down. So that's what I want to see as this year kind of progresses for this Steeler offense is trying to get those wide receivers. If we could see more stat lines like we saw against the Rams, and less stat lines like we saw against the Colts, where, I think he only completed like 4 or 5 passes to wide receivers in the whole game. Those are the kind of stat lines I like to see, because I like to be able to evaluate these wide receivers as this team moves into the 2020 season.
Tony, do you think that Mason Rudolph could be the future franchise quarterback of the Steelers, or have you seen enough to know that he isn't the long-term fit going forward?
I get hate for saying this, but no, I don't. I don't think Mason Rudolph is the long-term answer for Ben Roethlisberger. And if we're talking about long-term answer, right, we're talking about like the next great Steeler quarterback. Could he eventually be the starter in Pittsburgh? I mean, sure. I mean, he is right now, right? And so, could the Steelers just elect to say, hey, you know what? This was good enough. We'll stick with this going forward, and we'll see how Mason develops. I just don't think his ceiling is that of a Super Bowl winning quarterback or anything even close to that. At this point, he's barely even a starting quarterback level player. So I don't think he has it, right? I know it's early. We're only, we're 8 games into this evaluation, and that is early. But with some quarterbacks, you just kind of, pretty early the kind of throws that they're making and the look that they have as a quarterback, and he just doesn't have it. So unless that switch flips at some point, maybe it takes this offseason for that to happen, I don't see it happening. But the nice thing for the Steelers is that it's not a now question, right? Because Ben signed this 2-year extension, he intends on playing in the next couple of years. This is a question for essentially 2 years from now, unless something drastically wrong happened with that elbow surgery or Ben's rehab or whatnot, and he can't come back. But I see that as a question really for 2 years from now, not for today, which is nice for the Steelers because they see what they have in Mason Rudolph today, and I think they know, okay, he's not ready today, but 2 years from now, could he be ready? And then they'll watch that throughout practice and training camp.
Yeah, and what was kind of nice about trading for Minkah Fitzpatrick is that helps now. And yes, if Big Ben comes back next year and he doesn't perform well, and the team kind of tanks it down, that 2021 pick that you guys do still currently have will be a fairly high pick in theory. So yes, at that point, you've had another season to evaluate everything to where, all right, Big Ben's probably done. It's time for us to go out and get a rookie quarterback if they don't believe that Mason Rudolph is that guy.
Right, and I think that's the better way to do it anyway. Because I never liked the idea of getting this heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger, 4 years before Ben's going to retire. Right, I never liked that in the first place. I think the right way to build an NFL roster these days is to get a guy on his rookie deal, start him early, find out what you have. Because if he ends up being Patrick Mahomes, if he ends up being Carson Wentz or Jared Goff, or even what the Browns are doing with Baker Mayfield, it's the right strategy, which is get a quarterback who is super cheap, the cheapest they're ever going to be in their career. Get that for 4 or 5 years when you consider the 5th-year option, and build around that. Put as much talent, spend all your cap room on that. Do everything you can to surround that guy with talent for those years and try to make that work. And I think the Chiefs are doing that the right way. I think the Rams, look, unfortunately, Jared Goff is a bad quarterback at this point, but they did it the right way. Same thing with Carson Wentz couldn't stay healthy, but the Eagles did that the right way, and they got fortunate with Nick Foles playing as well. And I think the Browns are doing it the right way when you talk about building around Baker Mayfield. That's what I want to see the Steelers do. So I never liked the idea of having Mason Rudolph and then maybe have him for 1 year before his rookie contract ends. This team goes out, like you said, 2021, 2022, whatever that is, and gets a quarterback then and tries to build around him on a rookie deal.
Yeah, you could argue that John Dorsey has done a good job of surrounding Baker Mayfield with talent. It's just a matter of the coaching aspect and putting it all together, because there's Odell, there's Jarvis, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, David Njoku, who I don't think is going to be back on Thursday. He'll probably be back for the next game. But Nick Chubb, like I mentioned, and it's the offensive line has kind of been the problem, right? But the one thing that the Browns have been able to somewhat do this season is run the ball effectively, even more so this past Sunday against the Buffalo Bills with the addition of Kareem Hunt. Hunt did a great job in terms of lead blocking for Nick Chubb. The motion that they use him in definitely created problems for Buffalo. 5 out of the last 6 games, Nick Chubb has carried the ball exactly 20 times. That kind of seems to be the magic number. He's broken 100 yards in 4 of those games. How do you expect the Steelers defense to combat Nick Chubb and what he's been able to do with the addition of Kareem Hunt and all the motion that they run?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that is going to be really the question going into Thursday night is can the Browns get that rushing attack going? Because if they can, I think this is going to be a very interesting game. If the Browns want to come out and have Baker Mayfield throw the ball 40 times, I think every Steeler fan is going to be A-okay with that. But if the running game gets going, that's going to be a problem. So, and for the Steelers right now, without Stephon Tuitt, it becomes a bigger issue because you've got a depleted defensive line in some ways. You're going to see a lot of Javon Hargrave and Tyson Alualo, and I think they'll stick with 3 down linemen. You'll see a lot of Vince Williams in this game, who's been a real good run stuffer for this team. They gave Mark Barron the green dot last week, which is the guy who takes the signals in from the sideline. So I'd imagine if they're going to do that again, you'd see a lot of him and not a lot of Devin Busch. I think Devin Busch had 30-something snaps against the Rams. I think the Steelers were also worried in that game about Gurley getting going, although if you look at Gurley's stats, he had 12 carries for 73 yards, an average of 6.1 yards a carry. The problem is the Rams just didn't run the ball enough. So you'll see a lot of that. I think the Steelers are going to have to stick with that kind of front 7 look and not, they've done this kind of rover look recently where it's 1 down lineman, just Cam Hayward as that 1 down lineman and then kind of going more rover. I don't think they're going to, I don't think they have the luxury of doing that because of the explosion of Nick Chubb and really the explosion of Kareem Hunt as well. So I think you're going to have to see the Steelers stick in what would essentially be a base defense and try to play out of that. And it's going to lead to some mismatches in some cases. If you get that linebacker on a wide receiver type look out of a zone look. But I think for me what you can't do is you can't allow the Browns to allow a running game. You can't allow Nick Chubb to get going. You can't allow Kareem Hunt to get going. You have to put this game on Baker Mayfield's shoulders and trust that this defense, which is number 2 in the league right now in turnovers, can force some turnovers from Baker and make it easier on the Steeler offense.
You talk about getting into that rover look, and I think one of the things that they'll be able to do is confuse Baker. One of the things that we've noticed this season is there's been a lack of communication between the sidelines and Baker Mayfield in terms of getting the play in. Now, we're not sure if that's Todd Monken and Freddie Kitchens taking too long to decide what the play is or what's going on, but there's been probably about 90% of the offensive snaps, except when they run no huddle, that they're getting up to the line of scrimmage and that play clock is already ticking down at 7, 6, 5. Yeah. And that's where they're really going to be able to confuse the Browns if they don't get the play in quick enough and get lined up so Baker can diagnose things and see what he's got in front of him.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing I've noticed about Baker, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I think you guys watch a little more Browns than I do, but Baker seems to struggle against zone defense. Am I right on that? That the majority of his interceptions come when defenses are running zone and he kind of gets confused at the look?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So the Steelers, I think, have run much more man than normal. Well, I shouldn't say than normal. I mean, they did this last year as well. But they're going more man-heavy look. So I'll be interested to see if the Steelers continue to do that in this game, or if they run more zone-heavy, like you said, to try and confuse Baker. Because what Keith Butler is going to do, and what has been his specialty throughout his career, is bringing exotic blitz packages and all of that, and try to hurt what is a bad Browns offensive line. So I think he's going to want to get some pressure on Baker and make Baker get the ball out quickly. But I'll be interested to see if they play a lot of zone behind that, because I think that plays right into the Steelers' hands as well, right? With Baker getting confused not only by the blitz that's coming, but the zone look behind it. And I think the Steelers are trying to parlay that into quite a few turnovers, which give Mason Rudolph in this offense some easy chances to score.
All right, let's get into the prediction of this game. Tony, how do you think this one's going to shake out? Another Thursday night game. This game reminds me of 10 years ago, actually. It was a Thursday night game. Late in the year, it was a little bit later than this, that I attended, and it was the one where the Browns sacked Roethlisberger like 8-9 times, and ultimately it's what eliminated him from the playoffs. So I get the feeling that this is going to be another really low-scoring game. It's going to be cold out. Teams are going to want to run the ball. How do you see this one shaking out?
I'm with you. Every time we have done our schedule prediction on the podcast, and we've done it a couple times this year as we kind of reevaluate the team as the team changes, I always say this is one of the toughest games on the schedule. The Steelers going to Cleveland on a short week after two big games against the Colts and Rams. This is I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is the Browns Super Bowl, right? I mean, this is home game on prime time against a Steeler team that doesn't have Ben Roethlisberger, right? There's blood in the water. This is a chance for the Browns to really beat the Steelers for the first time in a while. So I'm not going to change my prediction. I'm going to still predict that the Browns will win this game, even though my head and my heart both tell me that this Steeler team, with as many turnovers as they're able to create, are going to have a field day against Baker Mayfield. I still worry about that running game, and I still worry about how this team is going to be able to stop Nick Chubb and stop Kareem Hunt and stop this Browns team from getting a running game going. And if they are and they don't turn the ball over and they don't give Mason Rudolph some short fields. Another thing to talk about with the Steelers is they haven't played a road game in a very, very long time. In fact, you have to go back to that Niners game in Week 3 to really say a true road game for the Steelers. I know they went to L.A. to play the Chargers, but that was a packed house of Steeler fans. So this is the first road game they've played in a while. We haven't seen Mason Rudolph. We haven't seen this offense. We haven't even seen this defense play on the road in forever. I'm excited to see it on Thursday night, but I do think the Browns pull off the upset here. I think they win a very close, like you said, a low-scoring game. They win something like 20-17 in a game that, does send the Steelers into some sort of, not necessarily a panic mode, but hey, what's going on here? We just beat the Rams. We just beat the Colts. How did we lose to the Browns? And they're 5-5 and trying to figure out if this playoff run is really going to happen.
Well, here's the thing. With how easy, I'm using that term kind of loosely, with the Browns having the easiest schedule in terms of winning percentage for the rest of the NFL season, the Browns have to win this game, because if they lose, go to 3-7, they're done. The season's over. There's no chance of making the playoffs if they lose this game. So they have to go in there Thursday night, win this game, get to 4-6, and then you still got Miami, you got Cincinnati twice. So then it kind of starts looking to greener pastures. But they have to go in Thursday night, beat the Steelers. Jack, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I truly think this is a must-win game. The Browns need to treat this like a playoff game. It's pretty much win or go home. If they win this game, they'll be 2-0 in the division, 4-6, and then momentum on their side as they head down the stretch where they play the Dolphins, the Bengals twice, the Cardinals, and then, of course, that key game against Baltimore in the end of December.
Yeah, and you look at where the Steelers' mentality is at right now, right? And I've talked about it. It's free money. I mean, this team has won 4 out of 5. 5 out of 6. And this is a team that had they had no expectation to be here. I mean, this is an 0-3 team that was thought of as being a top 5 pick. Now all of a sudden they've entered themselves back into the playoff race. Not to say that they're going to look past the Browns or anything like that, but when you talk about a team like Cleveland that is back against the wall, must-win situation, the Steelers just don't feel. I mean, they just can't feel that way because they're riding high, because they're winning 4 in a row. So I agree with you. The mentality of this game on a short week completely different between Pittsburgh and Cleveland.
Yeah, the Browns had their back against the wall on Sunday against Buffalo. They had to win that game, and they were able to do so. Jack, give me a final score prediction of this game from you.
I'm going to go Cleveland 24, Pittsburgh 23.
All right, you got a little more faith in the points than I do. I think this is going to be like that game 10 years ago. Both sides are going to struggle offensively. We did see the Browns get a little bit together, but I think the Steelers' defense is so good that this one's going to be I'll say a 16-13 game. It's going to be very low scoring, and I got the Browns winning this one, and it's going to be a good one. Anytime these two teams get together and you have playoffs on the line potentially, this late in the season, it really hasn't been the case for many years. So it's going to be a great atmosphere on Thursday night. I know I'm excited to be there. I'm curious to see how many Steelers fans show up on a Thursday night in Cleveland, depending on how many want to take off the entire weekend. So, Tony, I think it's going to be a great atmosphere Thursday night, and hopefully we see another hell of a football game.
I can't wait. It's this. I'm a little sad that the NFL made this series twice in 3 weeks. I really don't like when the NFL does that. But it looks like both teams are coming into this game relatively healthy. Obviously, the Steelers have Tuitt and Roethlisberger gone for the year, but Connor's healthy. So hopefully injuries don't decide this series, and I don't think it will. It should be, like you said, a really fun game on Thursday night. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate it. On our side, we have Olivia Vernon, who we're not sure if he's going to play or not. He didn't play Sunday against Buffalo. We're not sure if he's going to be back in time. And then another guy, Morgan Burnett, who you guys had, is also injured. It looks like he's not going to play. So it should be
honestly might be a good thing. Honestly.
Eric Murray.
Yeah. Oh, Eric Murray. Sorry, I got confused. Yeah. Eric Murray's not playing.
Okay.
Morgan's playing. So which might be a benefit for you. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm a fan.
All right, Tony. We appreciate you coming on. Glad to get you on here to talk a little bit of Pittsburgh. 2 games in 3 weeks is tough playing you guys, but I'd rather it be the last game of the year. I think that should be tradition. But hopefully Thursday night we get another good football game. And thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Tony. We absolutely appreciate it. As always, you can follow Jack on Twitter at JMcCurryCLE. You can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. Be sure to follow the podcast and the Dogland on Twitter at the Dogland. You can find our podcast on any platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. With all that, we're going to get on out of here. And most importantly, go Browns.